Okay. Okay, five, four. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Time to Talk About podcast. I'm Eden Obadum, and I'm here with Noble Obadum and a very special guest today.
Hi, my name's Nadia. On Instagram, I am underscore Nadia Samah with two H's. And yeah.
Bye. That's the only social media you want to plug?
Oh yeah, I do have a TikTok, but I'm not really on there like that. But if you want some, wholesome content, it is underscore Nadia, as in NADIYUHH.
Nadia.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Thank you
All
for
right.
coming on, Nadia. We're happy to have you.
Thank you for having me.
So today we want to take the time to talk about something a little more cultural. We want to talk about our experiences growing up in African households living in America. I think at this point you guys probably know, but Noble and I we're brothers and our parents are from Ghana, so we're very much Ghanaian American, very proud to be so. Nadia,
Sure.
you are Noble.
I am Kenyan and Liberian. My mom is Kenyan, specifically Kikuyu and my dad is Liberian and he is Loma. So I say I'm both and I'm very proud of both.
Which side do you feel like you are closer to?
So I get that question a lot. I think it's pretty equal. I try and keep it equal just because when I'm older, I want to be able to teach my kids about both sides equally. So I try to involve myself in both cultures at an equal level.
That's good.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, she mixed. She a,
She
a mixed
bicultural girl.
You I say biracial. You're a sick person, bro. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, I'm full. Well, you're part-time Ghanaian as well. Let's talk about that.
I am. So by association, I'm an Ashanti girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bitch from where?
Husband from Kumasi.
Period.
You didn't have
Speak tree. What you know?
Aquaba.
No, girl. Gracias is crazy.
You guys been teaching me Chui, so I know it's small here and there.
No, I get that because I'm part-time Kenyan since when I'm in Charlotte here, I'm around more I'm around Kenyans a lot at home too. But I go to
we
Kenyan
grew up
church
around
here,
Kenyans.
so when I'm here, I'm very much, very much Luo, very much.
Luo is crazy.
Actually, I don't know if there's more Luos in my church or Kisi or because they just speak Swahili. I have to ask. I think that there's a lot of Kisis, but
Eden, you know more Luos, right?
I know, like, okay, that's the thing, because my closest friends are either Luo or Kisi. So I feel like I know, like, and I guess you're Kikuyu, but you're literally the only Kikuyu person I know.
And see, that's so crazy to me, guys, because I only know Kikuyus. Like,
really?
The Kenyans I know here are the only non-Kikuyu people I know that are Kenyan. So it's very interesting to me.
No, I dead thought that like Kisi was like the only Kenyan tribe.
That's
and Luo for like maybe a good
that is
a good 10 years.
Yeah.
Like, please.
No,
because that's all we knew.
No, that makes sense. We be out like in Raleigh. There's a lot in Atlanta, Massachusetts, Maryland.
Atlanta is infested with Africans to begin with.
Oh yeah.
So yeah. Okay. So yeah, we just want to talk about our experiences growing up in, I guess, two very different cultures. Like, the majority of my childhood, or basically all my childhood, I spent here. Same thing with Noble.
Same with me.
Yeah, so it's like when we were outside the house and we were inside the house, like that was two very different experiences. And I feel like sometimes people that did not have a similar cultural background to us, had a difficult time understanding why I was the way I was coming from the home. And I think it's because, first of all, it stemmed from the fact that the parents are just so different from like white parents. Like very like like, yeah, no, let's talk about it. Go ahead, Nadia.
I just feel like the way we were raised was so I think the way they what's the word? Disciplined us was very odd at times.
Extremely odd.
Like just the things we got in trouble for. I feel like as developing children, we shouldn't have been so aggressively disciplined.
Absolutely not. Yeah, I agree.
It's a
For
case by
sure.
case type of scenario where it's like some parents are a little more harsh than others, but I think overall, African parents they just they go in.
And I mean,
They
okay,
mean well,
they mean
but
well. Like
it's
we have very
true.
good parents.
Oh
Like
yeah,
I
we
say
got
this
great
all the
parents.
time. Like my parents, I'm so grateful for them.
Mhm.
But I don't know if I would use the same punishing techniques on my own children. I don't think I'm going to because,
Mhm.
hey, like, anyways,
I
like
think I
literally.
think there needs to be levels. Like looking back, like from when I was a kid, like there were a lot of things that like I got in trouble for that I just didn't really understand, like why they were wrong or why they didn't like it or why they were so mad about it. So I think sometimes some things you need to take your child and sit down and talk to them. Like it needs to be more of a teachable moment than, let me crack the whip, And I mean,
No, ha!
That's
you know what
No.
I'm saying?
crazy.
It's true. And I think there are some situations where I may not need to be spanking. There are some situations that you have to be more firm. Like it's not every situation you can like, let's have a discussion, especially when kids are younger. Like you have to understand that's difficult too, because 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, not everything that you say they're going to be able to understand and actually sit there and reason with you. But there has to be a balance, in my
Absolutely,
opinion.
yeah.
I'm not a parent, but you know, it's I've definitely thought a lot about like my childhood and like maybe things that like mistakes that were made along the way and things that like, you don't want to pass on to your children because a lot of these things, our parents may not realize it, our grandparents may not realize it, but they can turn into sort of, traumas later that sort of follow you into your adulthood. And like, I don't want to bring those traumas on to, my kids, right?
Mm. That's the thing, because
But
they'd be like, "Oh, it worked on me. It worked on me." It's like, did it really though? Because then,
Yeah.
like, I don't know. It just does not make that much sense to me.
yeah,
Now, they say that though, but a lot of our parents have mental mental issues that they've never really addressed. I'm
yeah,
not gonna go too deep into that. That's personal. You know, yeah, that's not my place to really talk about. But I just feel like a lot of them have trauma or anger that they've stored up over
yeah.
the years that they've never really talked about. And then
Mm-hmm.
they carry the same tactics on to their children. And it's like we're living in a different time in a different society. Um, the kids today, I feel like we're a lot more outspoken. Um, and just not willing to like go along with everything. So that can cause a lot of
Yeah.
tension within the household. And I just feel like that causes a lot of strife that could be dealt with otherwise if the parents were just willing to break out of the way they were raised.
Mm.
But at the
That's
same time,
true.
you can't
Yeah.
blame them because that's how they were raised. That's what they were taught was right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's tricky.
Yeah. And I know I can speak for Ian and I that I think we're very blessed that, our parents have done the best job they can. And I think that's what
Yeah.
many parents do. Many African parents do, they're
Mm-hmm.
doing the best that they know how. But I've thought about it a lot for sure as I've gotten older. Like, like our dad, I think a lot about how, his father was not very present in his life after maybe like age 4 or 5. Like
Four-ish.
he was
Yeah.
only around when he was young. And after like by the time he got to like, maybe like the latter half of elementary school, his father wasn't really around anymore. So sometimes I wonder, like, how does that play into how he parents, because he didn't have the traditional father figure. Of course, he had his grandfather and like other male role models in his
Uncles and
life as he
stuff. Yeah.
grew, but you know and he's talked about it before. I know he told me before that like sometimes he wonders like how his dad leaving him as he was a kid, like because he obviously it was a big trauma for him. Like it was really hard for him to understand like why his dad was leaving them all of a sudden, and he says sometimes he
Yeah.
wonders like how has that shaped him negatively. So it's definitely like there's negatives to it, there's downsides to it, but it's also like how can we break the cycle, right? We have to be able to be like, okay, we know this, so how can we do better and not
How can
pass
we
it
do
on to the
better?
next generation?
Exactly.
And eventually, like my dad did go to live with his grandfather. Eventually, he moved to England, but obviously the relationship was like going to be very different
Mm,
than how it was when he was growing up in Ghana.
mm,
Especially because by that point he was a teenager. He was a lot older.
He wasn't used to having a father figure.
He wasn't used to having, like, his father would come to Ghana sometimes, but like they didn't really spend that much time together. Like his father had an entire life in England. So sometimes, like, I do, like Noble was saying, I do wonder how that kind of played into the way that he parented. Sometimes I feel like from time to time he had to figure out how to train us like himself, because he never had his dad to do that for him. And his mom was very much there. Like my dad loves his mom so much, you know. But I feel like, especially like in the culture that we have, the way that a mom parents and the way that a dad parents is just going to be very different.
Very different.
Very different, you know. So I don't know. It's just really interesting to see.
I want to talk about that too. What role did your mom play in your household growing up? And what role did your dad play? Because like in my household, I would say for an African family, we're very non-conventional. In the sense that my parents were always very adamant on me being able to speak about my feelings. Not in every context, but from time to time they would sit me down and tell me, you know, like, we're your parents. We want you to be able to like communicate with us openly. So I'm very blessed to have them as parents and to have that open communication. Of course, there's like certain things that they did that I won't be doing to my kids, but for the most part, my parents did an amazing job. And going back to the whole like non-conventional thing, in my household, my mom was more of the discipliner. Yeah, she would put her foot down from time to time. Whereas my dad, all throughout my childhood, he was very much like the chill parent, like the one we'd go to when we wanted something. Not just for that reason, but you know what I mean. Like, you know, he was chill. Whereas my mom, like, we were, I guess, a bit more scared of her, and didn't have, I guess, the typical motherly relationship where you go to your mom for like soft parenting. Whereas the dad is seen as more of the harsh parent. Like it was flipped for me and my sister. Like, how was that for you guys?
I feel like.
So let me ask you.
Oh,
sorry,
okay.
Eden.
No, you're
But
good.
before we talk about our family, let me ask you, Nadia, because you mentioned like your parents telling you that it's important to be able to talk to them about, you know, your feelings and things. So do you feel like you can talk to your parents about pretty much anything, like for the most part?
Okay.
Especially like now.
I think now that I'm an adult and I'm making most decisions on my own, I'm more open to speaking to them about things because I'm gonna make the decision and then go to them and talk to them about it. So by then it's already made. But as a kid, you know, there was definitely like times where things would happen and I kind of just like keep it to myself or tell like an older cousin just because I felt like their immediate response, even though it was always like at the end they would be very loving and accepting, but their first response would be like condemnation or like, hey, I can't believe it, you know, like all that stuff. So I think like over the years I've become a lot more open with them, but initially it was hard.
Okay, so we definitely have a lot of common ground there. For sure. Okay, so Eden, how would you say our parents were to answer her question?
I think that like in terms of who was the more disciplinary individual, I can't give a straight answer on that. I feel like it was both pretty equally.
It's both.
Yeah, it's definitely both pretty equally, but like in slightly different ways. Now my thing is like when it came to discipline, the main technique that my parents used was like, I'm not even gonna call it spanking. I'm gonna call it beating because that was wild, bro. Like that was actually wild. So, you know, and I don't know. I do feel like both of them disciplined us to a similar degree. But the rhetoric around it differed. I feel like my dad was very much straight to the point, very much bow, 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 don't do that again. Whereas my mom, I love my mom so much. And if she's listening to this, hey. But if she not, hey. Anyways, my mom was very much, I feel like with my mom, like when it came to like discipline, it was, yes, it was a physical thing, but there was also like a psychological part of it as well.
Oh, for sure.
Because my mom will be the one to like hide the fufu stick, or like she'll be the one to like pretend to talk to you about it. And then when you're
And
caught
then,
lacking,
bah!
pa, yeah,
Uh-huh.
that would be her. So I feel like when it came to discipline, they were both equally involved, which I guess is like good that they were involved. I just feel like the way in which they did it could have been improved. The other day I was talking to my parents about this. And I was like, okay, because you see, this kind of goes back to what you were saying, Nadia, about how you feel like a little more open with them. The communication, I talk to my parents a lot. Like, we have a great relationship.
Good.
But the communication, talking to your parents and having communication, good communication, are two different things.
For sure.
So I would say I'm comfortable with my parents, but I'm not comfortable telling them everything.
Yeah.
Because of the environment that they created when we were younger.
Yeah.
They always taught us to, without realizing it, they taught us to associate our mistakes or our disagreement with them with their anger almost every single time. You know what I mean? So and so I feel like I was able to talk to my parents about this, but it was not an easy conversation to have. This is like the other day, maybe like a week or so ago.
You're bold for real.
Right. And no, I don't even know how I'm still living here, but I was telling them, and I was like, because they were talking about my youngest brother, who is 14-ish, I think. And obviously, because he's that age, they're going to deal with him very differently than they deal with Noble and I, because we are grown. You know what I mean? But they were talking about him, and they're like, oh, we need to, da 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 da. And in my mind, I'm like, when you did this stuff in the past, I'm going to tell you that it didn't work very well. They're like, well, you turned out good. And I'm like, well, I turned out good because obviously, number one, you're very involved. Number two, I love Jesus. And number three, number three, I feel like after a certain age, I developed my own sense of morality. Not because you were beating me every 2 seconds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they were like, well, I still think it worked pretty well. And I'm like, I just don't. I'm telling you, like, no. Especially, like, obviously there were other things, but the majority of it was beating. I don't think they're gonna beat a 14-year-old child. Like, I just don't think that. I think at that age, maybe if you did something really, I even feel like even at my big age, if I did something like really bad, I feel like my mom would have no problem. She just doesn't do it anymore. You know what I mean? I feel like
they always ready though.
Yeah, I feel like she's always ready to spin the block. Like
the beating is more verbal. After you get to high school, it's more verbal.
Yeah, it's a lot more verbal.
In my opinion, can be worse.
Yeah, no, because
because more psychological.
I was about to finish my point, but I actually want to talk about that because the verbal borderline abuse is actually crazy.
Yeah, we gotta get into that.
It's okay, but bro, my parents are like great people. This is a disclaimer. They're great people. I love them. They're nice people. Good people.
Love the Padres.
Love them. Yes. But some of the things that I was told, growing up were not good. Like, I know for a fact I was definitely told, oh, like, you're being stupid, you're stupid, da 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 da. And it's like that is definitely
Kids
not. Yeah, you know what I mean? And like I remember there was something that happened when I was younger, and I was so scared to tell my parents, not because they would beat me. I knew they wouldn't beat me over it. But I was really afraid to tell my parents because I was afraid that I would have to deal with them telling me this, that, and the third, them coming from my character. Keep in mind, when this stuff was happening, I was like maybe 11 or 12. So very young. And I don't know. I feel like if I'm scared to talk to my parents because of the way that they will talk to me back, there's a huge problem there. There's a huge problem.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Again, my parents are great people, and they tried the best that they could. I think my parents are great parents
with the resources and the knowledge they had.
They had exactly.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm not going to take these. Like, it's not everything that they used to raise me that I'm going to take to my children.
Oh, definitely not.
Because now I'm on the other end of this. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And now I feel like we have the spaces to create this type of dialogue, whereas our parents, they didn't have these types of spaces.
Definitely
They
not.
could have, but it probably was shut down really quickly. That's what I'm saying. There are huge generational differences between their generation and ours, and I think that we should utilize those differences for the better, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You guys, your mic is making a lot of noise, so watch it. I don't know if you're touching it or what, but there's a lot of it sounds like it's moving. So
okay,
just
we'll cut this out. We'll cut this out.
Should I put it down?
Yeah, put it back.
Okay.
Nadia was holding it. No.
Oh, yeah, it
Yeah.
makes a lot more noise than you think.
Okay, we're gonna have
Dang.
to.
Hopefully it was good though.
Yeah, hopefully it was fine because I feel like we were making good points.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
All
that's
right.
fine. Yeah, I can just keep going.
Okay. Yes. 5 second
Um,
pause. 5 second pause. Okay. Okay.
um, I actually wanted to mention something you said before, Eden, because you were talking about how did you say it? I think you said something along the lines of like how our parents, there are certain things that they did where or I guess we did. Like we do something wrong and then we be afraid of their anger. You said something like that, right? And it's something that I've thought a lot about and talked with my other friends too who are also African about that there's so many things. It's really true that we didn't want to do because we were afraid of our parents being upset and we didn't understand why it was wrong. And that's one thing that I really want to make sure I don't bring that to my children if I do have children one day, right? Like I don't want them to fear doing something or to not want to do something because they're afraid that I'll be mad. I want them to not do something because it's wrong. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
even though in the end, and it goes back to what you were saying about how mommy and daddy said that, oh, you turn out okay. Well, that's because you're not doing wrong things because you're scared of, their reaction. It doesn't necessarily mean you're doing the right thing for the right reason, right? And in most situations, it sounds like okay, that's fine because like who's going to be able to tell the difference? But I think it manifests itself when you grow older and you become an adult. And I feel like this happens to a lot of African kids, right? You become an adult and you go out there and then you're on your own. You have to make your own decisions and things, and then you don't really have the what do you call it? Like the what's the word? You don't have the personal resolve to be able to hold yourself back, to discipline yourself, to do the right thing because the right thing to do, right? Because maybe you're less scared at that point of your parents yelling at you because you're an adult, you're on your own. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And so it becomes like even simple things with like, maybe let me not go to this event because I need to clean my house or I need to finish homework or something like that, right? Something that like when you were a kid, your parents would yell at you for. But now it's like, okay, when your parents are not around, you're just going to go to the event knowing very well that that's not the right thing for you to do, but
Yeah.
you don't have any problem doing it because you're not scared of your parents yelling at you. Whereas if you really thought about it and was like, hey, this is not the right thing to do, you would do it because it's not morally, or maybe this is not a moral thing, but it's not
It doesn't
right
make
for
sense.
it. Doesn't, it's not practical, right? Do you
Mm-hmm.
understand what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and those things, it's like if you ask any adult, they're going to be like, yeah, I know that it's wrong to procrastinate. It's not that you don't know, but it's like subconscious almost. And I found that's happened to me a lot. Not that situation per se, but like a lot of things where it's like, wow, I'm kind of getting carried away because nobody's going to check me. And it's like, I need to sit back and be like, okay, this is wrong because this, you need to be able to have that self control, that discipline.
And you
And
don't learn that.
you
You
don't learn
don't
it. You're
learn
just
that.
learning, oh, don't do that because my parents are going to be mad. Or if I am going to do something, find a good way to hide it. Or you
Mm-hmm.
better sell the lie so that they don't figure it out, which is really, it creates problematic adults,
I
at
think
least tr- adults with trauma, which is not great.
yeah. I think going off of that, that's a really good point. But like many African kids growing up didn't have the freedom to make their own decisions. Like even
Mm-hmm.
simple things like what school you want to go to or
Hi.
like like stuff like that. We didn't have the freedom to make those decisions for ourselves. And so then
Yeah.
we become adults and we're in this like very fast-paced moving world where we're constantly being faced with decisions and very big decisions. Um and like you said, like we sometimes don't know how to like handle those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Um and so many kids will abuse the freedom they have when they're an adult and just
Mm-hmm.
do what I guess I guess what appeals to them most, even if it's not what's best for them, because they were never given freedom to make their own decisions and make mistakes and learn from that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that stems from the fact that African parents struggled to came to this country, and so they want us to do everything right, go by the
Mm-hmm.
book, and make the right decision the first time, because number one, they don't want to see us fail.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, they
Yeah.
don't want their work to go in vain.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that, but then that creates a very just like an individual that just can't function on their own,
Mm.
um, or just doesn't know how to function as an adult, as maybe other individuals might be able to. And I feel like sometimes most African kids have to learn it from like social media or from their friends how to make certain decisions, or they end up going to like other influences when they could have just learned it growing up in the house.
See, that's the thing. I
Yeah.
think that for me, especially like when I first came to college, what I realized is that I was growing up in a system like that. I had become like a machine that was programmed to do whatever my parents told me to. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And while you're like growing up in the house, you know what I mean? Like it's like, okay, yeah, you should listen to your parents, but there will come a time when your parents are not there and you have to make decisions on your own. Now, sometimes when I even catch myself, if I have a decision to make, I will consult my mom first when really I shouldn't. And then she's like, well, why can't you make this decision on your own? And for me, it's like, it kind of stems from you. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like it stems from you not allowing me to make those own decisions. In my mind, I think that overly strict parents inherently, although unintentionally, set their children up for failure.
They do.
So true.
Because first of all, someone needs to look like a deep dive, bro, into the pipeline. I don't even know what to call it, but like this pipeline of an African child to going to college very, very far, far away. Now, I didn't go to college very far, far away, but a lot of Africans that I do know did go to college very
Hmm.
far, far away, ran because a lot of these people were not like they ran. They were not given the freedom to learn and grow because freedom is very, very important, just like you guys are saying. So
There's
now
definitely a
they're
link.
here. There's a link. Now they're here. These are the people that are the wildest people, and it's like question mark because if you had known them before, you would never have imagined them doing whatever. You
Yeah.
know. You know what I'm saying?
No, it's true.
And I know that for myself to a certain extent. Even like I've kind of become that person. Not like to the fullest extent. No, not to the full. Not too much, Nadia. Not to the fullest extent.
Disclaimer.
But yeah, but like I've come like sometimes, like you guys are saying, like I'm really realizing that I need to learn how to regulate my self-control because it's not
Yeah.
something that
That's
was
real.
ever given to me. Like I never had the opportunity to be able to exercise that and to grow my own self-control. You know what I mean? Because it was always like,
Yeah.
do this, don't do that. It was never, you make this decision. We will steer you in the right way, but you need to learn how to manage your own affairs. And now all of a sudden, once you get to a certain age, you're dropped in several situations where you have to manage your own affairs.
Hmm.
Like in my day-to-day life, I'm not gonna call my mom and be like, "Oh, what should I eat for?" That's like a stupid like
Yeah.
example, but should I go here? Should I go here? Should I da? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have to learn how to regulate your own self-control, just like you guys are saying. And I feel like in our cultures, especially because so many African cultures are family oriented, which is good, but so much oriented, like, hey, English, they're way too oriented on like respect for elders above everything else, even when it is impractical.
Or they're
Um,
wrong.
or they're wrong. We don't necessarily get the chance to become, you know, to become, you know what I'm saying? Like the word's not
Yeah.
coming, but you know what I'm saying. You know what I mean? And I feel like our parents have independence. That's what I'm saying. Our parents have grown to be independent because a lot of them have had to coming here to America.
Yeah.
But, maybe if they were still living overseas, it wouldn't be like that. Or maybe they would have had to learn it by force or by fire, and it would not have been a cute experience doing so. You know what I mean? When really, as a parent, you could be setting your child up to learn how to be independent on their own, because of cultural values or whatever else, you're going to allow your child to, walk through brimstone and fire just to become an independent individual. That does not make sense to me.
Yeah.
And I feel like our parents might not necessarily make the connections between, their style of parenting and these issues that we deal with when we're older because they didn't experience them in the same way, number one. And number two, because maybe they never expanded, their discourse to a place where they could talk about things like this. Again, going back to the cultural thing, because it's like if you say anything that is not what they think, that it's like, hey, sit down. You know what I
It's
mean? Like that,
rude. You're rude.
yeah,
You're
That's
disrespectful.
that's the one.
Because
Bro,
why can I not express myself and you just hear me out
without being told that, oh, you're being rude, you're being rude. No,
Like, I have
bro,
an opinion.
Nadia. Okay, I have a story time. This happened this summer, bro.
Story time, okay.
This summer, right? Noble and I were we were just chilling with our parents. I don't even remember the circumstance, the situation. All I remember is that we were chilling with our parents and something came up, and Noble and I were trying to communicate to our parents that, like, you know, sometimes, when you say things, sometimes it's just wrong. And we don't even mean that in a disrespectful way. We're not even saying that in a disrespectful way, at all.
Yeah.
But you always seem to take offense to it, even though at this point in our lives, 22 and 19, we're going to have different opinions than you. We have our own lives and we need to be allowed to steer them in our own direction. With input from you is entirely fine. But,
I remember.
Sometimes
I remember what it stemmed from.
You do?
Yeah, it stemmed from, I don't really want to get into all the details of it, but basically it's like mommy thought I was doing something that I was not actually doing, but she was convinced she knew, even though she was not there doing it with me. And that's a very common thing, I think, with African parents. It's like they think they know everything you're doing, when in fact, you may be in college, for example, and they're not with you at every moment to even know, but they think they know, but they're actually wrong.
Yeah,
But
and it's like
know,
you're never allowed to say, like, you're never allowed to say, like, oh, that's not entirely accurate. Let me explain myself. But and then, because if you do that, then it's rude, and then if you don't do that, they keep going, and it gives very accusatory. Like whenever they see something, or at least they think they see something that you are doing or not doing, and they don't like it, then they'll start accusing you, and it becomes very mentally and emotionally draining, extremely. And you're not allowed to clear your name, or else all of a sudden it is rude.
Auntie Grace knows, and Auntie Grace is telling
right.
Evelyn.
It's like, how does that make sense? No, because like, no, bro, no, no, like what, bro? The amount of things I know about some of my friends, some of my African friends, that ideally I should not be knowing.
Yeah, because their parents were talking to our parents about it when they should not have been.
We're like, dang. It's not mixed. Sorry, the Ghanaian is really jumping out at me today, but it just is not making sense to me at all. It does not add up. Like 1 + 1 is not 3. I don't know. I don't understand it at all.
And I sure hope my parents ain't out there spreading my business.
I feel like, bro,
you may never
know better.
You may
never
my
parents know better, bro. I feel like my parents know better.
Yeah, I don't, for the most part, I don't think our parents do.
Yeah,
I've never really had the inkling, except for that one time Dad was preaching the sermon, Eden, and then,
he
was just saying things that were untrue.
Bro, one thing about
they weren't even correct.
Bro, if my dad has listened to this, hey, but bro, one thing about him is that if he's in church, he's gonna make up stuff. And also, we need to talk about African parents and religion, because I feel like, bro, I'm about to get to that next. But long story short, I don't think I've met a single African that was not at least raised like religious, which is absolutely. I'm Christian. Like I'm Christian. I love being Christian. Amen. But
Black
please,
people in general, and I think it's a lot of it stems from the fact that Black people have had a lot of struggles in this world. Right. And faith is one of the few things that I think has kept us sane for centuries, frankly.
Right.
But I did want to, before we go to religion, I did want to say really quickly, to bounce off of Eden's point, I do think it's very important. And it's one thing I want to make sure I do, if I do have children, that we allow our children to make mistakes and to make decisions sometimes. Like there are going to be times as a parent, you need to say, no, you need to do this, right? You can't be like a lot of white parents and just let your children decide everything, and then you have no control, right? Because we've all seen how that ends. But there are some situations where your kids, and especially as they go into high school, college, and start to become adults, they need to be able to make those decisions for themselves
without being,
and make the mistakes. Yeah, you can give them the advice and say, hey, this is the way you should go, but by the end of the day, it's up to you. And when you're able to make mistakes and suffer the consequences of those mistakes, that's how you learn. If you don't ever make that mistake because your parents would just push you this way, you didn't have the option, deep down, you don't understand why it's so bad. You may think you understand where your parents coming from, but also in a way, you may not think it's as bad as they are saying it is, right? Until you find out for yourself. And I think that's the thing sometimes, like kids need to be allowed to make mistakes and deal with the consequences. That's how you learn, But it is very much what you said, Nadia, that African parents being immigrants here, they want us to succeed. They want us not to struggle and have to deal with things that they dealt with. So it's very understandable for them to be like, please go this way, because I may have made that mistake when I was a kid and I don't want you to make the same thing. But there are some things you got to make the mistake to learn. Sometimes you have to touch the stove and get burned, I feel.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
No, it's very true. I think we're heading towards religion and just talking about back to that place. Now, for me, like I said, love my parents and I love the way they raised me because religion was never forced down my throat. And it's crazy because I know for a lot of African kids, like it very much was, and that caused a bit of just like disconnect between them and God. And I think it's very unfortunate.
Very.
That's actually very common for a lot of African kids. In my situation though, like if I was sick or maybe I was tired or I just didn't feel like going to church, I didn't have to. And that's something I'm definitely going to give my kids a choice to choose. Now, giving them the choice to choose another religion is something that I'm still forming opinions on because I feel like within my household, I want my kids to be Christian. However, I would never want to force it upon them. I feel that's a very tricky situation. So, as someone that's like still a young adult, I don't have like a full opinion on that. However, with my parents, it was never forced on me, and I chose God for myself. And because of that, I would say, a very healthy relationship with God that I'm grateful for. But I think within African churches, there's a lot of judgment and a lot of misunderstanding between the youth and the older generation because the older generation they're so stuck in their ways.
Yeah, they are not ready for it, Mangina. No, Mangina. Cut that out. They are not ready for it, Nadia, but go ahead.
They're so stuck in their ways, and they're not willing to see things from our. For years, I was in the church choir, and before coming to college, I quit. Singing is something that I love to do, but I just didn't feel like it was for me anymore. And thinking about it now, the reason I felt like that is because I felt judged. I felt condemned singing. I didn't feel like I was doing it for me or to bring me close to God. And it's because number one, it was low key not a decision that I made for myself, which is another story in itself.
Heavy on that.
Even though it was something that I loved to do, I just felt because I wasn't able to make a decision for myself and because there was so much judgment involved, that kind of distanced me from God and distanced me from loving choir in general. Yeah.
I think okay, I understand like you hate English, but what you're saying makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense to me. I think I wouldn't say that my parents necessarily forced religion on me either, but I would say that they did not give me that much of a choice. You know what I mean? Now, I'm not mad at that because I feel like my parents very much were the type of people to say, we cannot like do your religion for you. Like we cannot believe in God or have a relationship with God on behalf of you. That's something you have to do for yourself. So I feel like them telling me that was very good from a religious point of view, just because it allowed me to realize that this religion was something, at least religion or at least spirituality would be something that I would have to do on my own. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like it's not going to be my dad's relationship with Christ that makes me saved. Like that's, you know what I mean? And I don't know, I'm really happy for my parents. I'm really happy that my parents emphasized that to me. You know what I mean? The only thing I wish they would have done differently is allowed their allowed their I don't know if I'm saying this right, but I wish they had allowed there to be more room for questions. Um, and Noble can speak to this on many volumes. And sometimes whenever we're with our family, this even still happens from time to time. I feel like, especially because now I have my own opinions about religion and stuff. Again, I'm still very much Christian, but I would not say I am Christian in the same way that my parents are. I'm just not. You know what I mean? But I feel like when I was younger, at least, I would have certain questions and they would immediately be shot down. Immediately. And not only would they be shot down, sometimes in the response, there would be just like an insult to almost my intelligence. And as a young child, especially one that was so, I know as a child, I was really eager to learn about everything under the sun. Sometimes that very much shut it down, you know? We would have family worships, you know, and I feel like my parents wanted us to, you know, talk and participate. But whenever we did, if it wasn't exactly on the same page that theirs was, it would be shut down. So that doesn't encourage your children to participate. So it would get to a point where we would be having family worship and my dad would be like, why is nobody saying anything? Da, 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 da. And again, it goes back to you because we try to make comments. And even if we make comments that are not inherently, you know, against what he is saying or my mom was saying, you know, it would be like oh, what you're saying is very vague. It's not deep enough, you know, da da da. Like sometimes like we would exactly sometimes we would pray together as a family. Here they go. Oh, your prayer. My dad, he used to love to say your prayer is not sensible enough. What do you mean? Like in my mind, I'm just like, I'm talking to God. Like I don't exactly like I don't really know what you mean by sensible enough. Like I don't know. Like does that mean I'm not using enough big words? Like you know what
That's
I'm saying?
between
Like
you and God.
exactly. Like I don't know. It just blew me every single time. And so over time, I feel like looking back, I think it got to a point where I was following religion for my parents more so than for myself. And when I came to that realization, that day was a really, really crazy day for me. You know, because I was like, that means that my entire background growing up in this church is basically like it's not a good I don't know what I'm saying right now, but it's the foundation is not strong. Yeah, I need to sit down and reevaluate everything. You know what I mean? And I feel like I'm still kind of in the process of reevaluating that, you know, because so much of my childhood was spent hey, spent trying to get validation from my mom and my dad for them to say, "Oh, you know, what you're saying is very profound," you know? I don't know. And then for the church thing, I feel like and I love my church. Our church was not entirely Africans. But there were quite a few. Like that's why you know like a lot of my friends growing up were Africans. So we had that community and that community was probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. That community is probably it's part of the reason I'm so happy and so outspoken about being Ghanaian and being African. You know, I feel like if I didn't have that community, I would have lost that identity such a long time ago. You know what I mean? But that community was also very interesting because I feel like we were pushed in several ways to do certain things. And they always put an emphasis on participating in church, which is always fun and great, you know, and we would make the decision to do that. But if you want to remove yourself for whatever reason, it got very difficult to do that from time to time. You know, even now, like I'm looking back and even now, because I'm still very much a part of that church, you know, in looking at, you know, okay, separating myself, maybe not like in a bad way, like not separating myself from that church, but separating myself from like, okay, I don't feel like doing these things anymore, or I don't have the bandwidth to do things like that anymore. It's always a problem. Always a problem. You know what I mean? Um, go ahead.
Okay, another thing I wanted to add, a lot of African churches do things for show. Oh, because
Mm.
this is coming and she wants to see you sing. Or you have to do this because you're a pastor's daughter, or yada, yada, yada. The things of God, number one, should never be forced. And it should be something you want to do. God is not
Amen.
any of us to serve him. It should be a conscious decision and something that you're feeling called to do from your heart. And I feel like in a lot of African churches, serving and being involved is pushed upon the kids. And like even Miss saying, like it creates a thing where like when you do want to back out, it's seen as you trying to run away from things God. But it's like, no, I'm running away from you.
Hey,
You know?
yeah, no, you got it. Like you literally
From
got it,
you.
bro. Like,
I'm running away from you because you are pushing this on me. This is not
Yeah.
what God wants from me. You don't even know that. Did you pray about it? I haven't prayed about it.
ooh,
Right.
You telling me this is what I need to do? No.
this is a
You didn't
major
give me
clear.
you didn't give me the
This
op-
is
the,
a
op- the
major
option,
read.
the opportunity to even be able to pray about it. It's just, can you do it? Yes, no.
Like,
Exactly.
And you better say yes. And that honestly, and at least in my experience, that happens in all churches, not just African churches.
yeah,
But
yeah,
Africans sort of tend to exacerbate it because
yes, for
our
sure.
culture, you know, appreciates respecting your elders.
Yes.
Yeah.
And B, also, we appreciate religion a lot, and especially service, acts of service, whether it is religion or outside of religion.
Yes.
I feel like those are things that are really big to African culture. So it sort of makes it a little worse. But we don't go to an African church, even though we have a lot of Africans, and we experience that all the time. But you know, the Africans be pushing. Yeah. But I did want to say from earlier, another thing too, like when we were growing up, because you were talking about being able to ask questions and stuff. I think we've talked a little bit about before, but we haven't talked too much about our faith on the podcast. But most people listening know we're Seventh-day Adventists. And
well, Noble and I are not Nadia.
Yes. Thank you for the correction. Yeah. And a lot of the thing that we've heard a lot, and especially from the Africans, I don't feel like it comes from all of our church,
mostly from the Africans,
bro. Is like, oh, when we ask a question, they'd be like, oh, you know, how you Adventist can you don't know this? You should know this, right?
Oh my
And goodness, so it makes you feel like you can't. That's why I wanted to tie in what we said earlier about asking questions. It also makes you feel like you can't ask questions because then you're going to be judged for, like, you know,
not being a good enough Adventist.
You're like, that does not make sense, you know, which is also kind of a very African thing in a sense, because it almost sounds like you're in school and the teacher's like, why don't you know this? We talked about it already type thing, you know?
I've heard that way too many times.
That was something that really, for me, sometimes it made me a little nervous to ask questions. But as I've grown older, I've come to care less about that because building your own relationship with Christ is really important, right? And a part of that is being able to understand things for yourself. So I kind of stopped caring about what do people care, like if I should know it, I don't. So let me ask and let me learn, right? Kind of like if you're in class and you're asking a question that you know you should know, right? You may feel embarrassed. Everybody else is like, we already talked about, like, this kid should know that this is easy, but the professor doesn't really care about that, most likely, because the teacher just wants you to learn the material, right? Mm-hmm. But I did want to say too, I kind of feel like when it comes to religion in general and like how parents should deal with it, teaching it to their kids, is I see religion as, and most people consider it by definition as part of your value system, part of your belief system, right? Mm. So if you want your kids to have moral values, right? Things that are right and wrong, right? You don't want your kids to steal, to lie, to kill people, to do anything that's, you know, clearly morally wrong, right? You wouldn't say to your kid, okay, this is the right thing to do. The right thing is not to steal, but I'm going to let you choose to decide if you're going to steal this or not, right? You can't say that to a kid, right? You can't give them that option, that power, right? They need to be steered in the correct direction, right? Because many may take the wrong option, but even if they don't, right? You want your kids to understand that values are important, right? And this is the way that you expect them to go. Now, when they turn 18 and when they're an adult, then it's different, right? That is up to them. And you can encourage them at that point. By that point, you as an adult need to be able to stand for yourself and be like, okay, this is what I believe in. These are my values. So for me, I've always seen religion as that way. You know, everybody teaches religion to their kids differently. But I know, especially for us as Adventists, the Bible says, train up your child in the way that he should go or she should go. And when they're young, they'll not depart from it, right? So for us, we feel like it's very important that you do teach your children your faith and what you believe, right? And when they're adults, they may depart from it, they may not, but then that decision's up to them between their God. So I've always struggled a lot with, you know, I know there's a lot of parents, especially these days, you know, especially palm-colored ones, who will be like, for example, they'll be like, okay, we're going to church, and the kid's like, I don't want to go to church, I just don't want to go, and they're like, okay, you don't have to go, right? And on one hand, I understand that, like, you don't want to force religion on your kids, you don't want to force anything, because then they're not learning. But at the same time, if you're always letting your kid be like, I don't want to go to church, and you're letting them, you know, make that decision, have that power, are they going to be able to really learn and understand the importance of and the value of that religion in your life, right? And even be able to have enough understanding to say when they grow up, okay, I want to go this way or not go this way, right? So I feel like religion, at least for me, is one of those things that you have to be very clear in terms of like your authority as the parent, right? And saying, okay, we're going to church. This is why we go to church, right? It's not, I'm just forcing you to go to church. This is why we go to church. This is why we believe what we believe, right? And not let your kids sort of take over in that sense, in terms of power dynamic, because that can happen too. Not really to Africans, I don't think, because African parents will never let that happen. But with other families, that can happen too. And so you don't want it to become, the power dynamic to become flipped. But at the same time, you don't want to force it. You want them to be able to understand the importance and to be able to have their own relationship with church, with God themselves. And then when they're an adult, then they can make that decision. But I feel like that's a mistake a lot of people make too on the other side of the spectrum. There's the African side, right? That's really strict. But there's also the other side where people are kind of like, okay, you can do whatever you want. But if you're letting your 10-year-old kid do whatever they want, right? They're probably not always going to choose the right thing, right? You're saying you can eat all the candy you want. They're going to eat all the candy they want, right? Because candy is sweet. Saying candy is good, right? So that's kind of how I feel about like religion. It's like a value, right? Just like right or wrong, right? You're not going to let your kid decide on their own what is right and wrong. You're going to teach them. Right. But I agree that it's very, very important that like you make sure you're trying to understand like why you believe what you believe. When it comes to religion, why it's important, and that they also need to be able to form that connection to Christ, or if it's another religion, whoever you believe in or whatever you believe, they need to be able to have that understanding on their own, right? It's not their parents' understanding that they're running with, and they're not doing it for their parents' approval. Because in the end, when people do grow up that way, then in the end, when they become adults, usually they depart from it anyway because they never had any real connection to it. But yeah, religion's a tricky. That's why I will say this last thing, and then I'll stop talking because I've been talking for a while. But that's why I always struggle to understand how people who are in families with two religions, how they balance it, right? It's very tricky. Some
people be doing it.
I don't know how, but bless them. It's very hard because how do you teach your children like both religions and be able for them to be able to understand the importance of both and not feel like, they have to go with one over the other, or they have to prefer one over the other,
or even to not feel overwhelmed as well. I feel like I will feel overwhelmed. I know some people do it.
Yeah.
Basically the entire country of Sierra Leone. But beside the point.
I feel like as a family, you'd want your whole family to have the same values.
At least for
right.
me,
So when you have two different religions, those are two opposing, value systems. I mean, the moral values will probably be the same, right? There'll be some things in common, but I mean, it's not that it can't be done because a lot of people do it, but it's a lot trickier.
I agree. That's what I was saying earlier. Like for me, I'm going to take my kids to church when they're young.
Yeah.
However, it's never going to be a thing where I'm forcing it down their throat.
I agree.
Feel like
causes
like hatred for God.
It definitely. I feel like it definitely. I've heard way too many stories in which it does, and so I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to do that. I feel like one problem that I have is when people like. I think a lot of times like Christians in general, couple like a sense of morality to religion, and I feel like that's such a big problem to me because whenever we talk to individuals who are not religious or even are not Christian, we always automatically look down on them as if they have like a messed up sense of morality, which is very problematic to me. You know what I mean? And so I feel like, yes, like I do want like religion to be like an important thing in my household if I have kids, but at the same time, I feel like I still want there to be a little bit of like mobility between that, like between where they stand, because I want it to be something that they choose for themselves. I don't know. I will get it together by the time I'm a parent.
Right, we have a few years.
We have time.
Yeah. But I understand. I understand all points of view. Where this like it is.
Personally, I do think it's very important. And for those of us who believe in the Bible talks a lot about it, that when you're getting to a relationship with somebody, when you're marrying somebody and starting a family, that you do marry somebody that shares those values with you, especially your faith and your religion, because it does make it very difficult, right? Because a lot of times in many families, what ends up happening is the kids are forced to go one way. They can't even experience both because like one parent feels strongly about their way and the other parent feels strongly about theirs. So I feel like to be able to have even any effectiveness with your kids, you need to be on that same page, right? And then if your kids choose to go a different way when they grow older, that's fine because that's their decision, right? But for when they're younger and it's those formative years, they're being taught, right? They need to be able to have like one message
Makes
being
sense.
shared with
Makes
them.
sense.
At least that's always been my understanding of it, because it can be confusing, but people have their ways of doing it. People do what works for them, but it's not easy. I know for sure.
Not easy at all.
It's not easy, cry.
Oh, I think there's more we could talk about.
There's so much more.
Yo, this is so deep. Like growing up African, there's so many things. I find so much joy in it though. Like I'm so proud to be African.
For
But
sure.
Oh, so much, bro.
it's a lot.
First of all, African music is the best music in the world, period.
Period.
Argue with your mother. Argue with
Oh,
your
I
mother
think
and
it's hot.
father. I don't care.
It definitely is. Like the beat, the dancing, like it eats.
I love the diversity, of African music, right? I feel like in the American music landscape, in our industry, it's kind of like, depending on who you are, what your background is, what your race is, you're kind of expected to do one thing or the other, right? White people are expected to do country and pop. Black people are expected to do rap and R&B, right? And I feel like that's the beauty. And when people try to do others, the music industry, specifically here in America, makes it so difficult for those people. And I think it's just beauty that, like, African music, like, there's pop elements in it, there's rap elements, there's art, like there's all the different types, right? And people can just make the music that appeals to them. Yes, gospel. Let me not forget, please. Diana Hamilton, that's my little name,
bro. That's bae.
We love her. Awesome. Like, come on. Period. Okay. But
go ahead, Noble.
I mean, that was pretty much my point. I think just that's the beauty of African music, if we're talking about that. But we are pretty much coming up on an hour. I don't know if anybody had any final thoughts. We might have to circle back and continue this episode and, like, have a part 2 or something. Yeah. I know, Eden, we talked before about doing like a product of immigration, like immigrant kids episode. So
yeah, because
I think we may have to,
like, the academic stuff.
Yeah, I think we may have to do that episode and have Nadia come back.
Yes,
and maybe some other people for some other places.
Yeah,
that would be good.
Especially about my experiences with other cultures or just people that aren't African and how they saw me and how that made me see myself. Like, I could talk about that for hours,
all day.
Bro.
Hey. Honestly, it's just a miracle that I'm so outspoken about being African. Yeah. Because now, see, that's the thing. It's God only. Because, like, my thing is, like, now it's cool to be African. But when I was 11, 12, it was not cool. African booty scratcher, this and that. Third. Please shut your mouth.
American culture has changed in that way. That, like, now we're getting to this place where, obviously there's a lot more cultural appreciation, not appropriation. I mean,
there's both.
That too. But
like, for
now
real.
People have a lot more cultural appreciation and are realizing that a lot of what we consider to be American culture was taken from Black people in one way or another, whether it was African Americans or actual Africans. Like, culture's so influenced by them. America's really a cultural melting pot. So now it's cool to be Black because everybody's taking from Black culture in one way or another. But that's another discussion too, for another day.
For a different day.
Yeah.
Definitely a different day. All righty. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up here.
Yeah. This was good.
Yeah, this was a great conversation. Thank you, Nadia, so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Like I said, it's good to have these conversations. I think it helps just to reflect on life.
Yeah.
Whatever.
For sure. Yeah, I like us bringing friends on. We need to do it a little more, Eden.
Yeah, we
because the first few episodes, or most of the episodes this season, have been just us. So we got to keep bringing guests on. But thank you, everyone who's tuned in to listen. We'll put Nadia's social media in the description box along with ours and everything else that is there. So please make sure to follow us and do all those things. And yeah, and definitely, like, can you comment on podcasting? I don't think so.
No,
if you would like, I forgot for a minute, there's not YouTube. If you would like us to talk more about, like, African households, growing up with African parents, being children of immigrants, let us know. That you can do on social media. Even you can put a comment there, let us know, because I think those are conversations we could continue for sure. And I'd like to invite some of my other friends too, like who are my Asian friends and stuff, and Latino friends, to bring like their viewpoints as well, because that would be a really good episode. But anyway, any last thoughts, guys, or shall we just sign off?
It's your fave Kenyan Liberian.
Hey, please sit down. Hey, sit down. Bro, we're so unserious.
We're so unserious, man. It's crazy.
This was fun. Yeah.
All right. Okay, people.
Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.